As bombs continued to rain down on the Damascus suburb of eastern Ghouta on Monday, the United Nations Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, demanded that the Syria ceasefire resolution that the Security Council adopted unanimously over the weekend take effect immediately. More than 500 people have died in eastern Ghouta in the past week, including 24 in the 24 hours since the ceasefire resolution was passed, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, a monitoring group based in Britain. The Secretary-General's anger was matched by that of his colleague, Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein, the United Nations top human rights official, who pinned responsibility for the prolonged misery in Syria and other conflict zones on the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. Security Council resolutions are only meaningful if they are effective, Mr. Guterres said at the opening of a session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva. Eastern Ghouta cannot wait. It's high time to stop this hell on earth. The resolution approved on Saturday by the Security Council after days of haggling by permanent members called for a 30-day ceasefire in Syria, but it contained loopholes that allowed intensive bombing and shelling of the beleaguered enclave to continue. President Bashar al-Assad of Syria and his Russian and Iranian allies appear to be exploiting the wording of the resolution, which did not set a firm date for the ceasefire to take effect and excluded attacks on opposition forces identified as terrorists, who make up some of the estimated 580 opposition fighters entrenched in eastern Ghouta. Efforts to combat terrorism do not supersede obligations under international law to protect civilians, Mr. Guterres pointedly reminded his audience, taking aim at Syrian, Russian, and Iranian representatives who have stated their determination to keep up military action against terrorist groups. Mr. Guterres demanded that aid agencies be granted access to deliver humanitarian assistance to the nearly 400,000 people in eastern Ghouta who have been besieged for years, and to evacuate hundreds of critically ill patients whose transfer to hospitals less than an hour's drive away has been resolutely blocked by the government. Speaking immediately after the Secretary-General, Mr. al-Hussein, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, spread responsibility beyond the powers fighting there. With 6 months remaining in his term and no intention of extending it, he apparently felt free to be blunt. Second to the criminally responsible, those who kill and maim. The responsibility for the continuation of so much pain lies with the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, he told an audience that included several heads of state and dozens of foreign ministers. Alongside eastern Ghouta, he said Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Myanmar, and Yemen had become some of the most prolific slaughterhouses of humans in recent times because governments had failed to heed warnings and to prevent the rising horrors. The Security Council's 5 permanent members should surrender their pernicious use of the veto, he said, and accept an initiative from France, one of the 5, that would prevent its use where a mass atrocity has occurred. Britain, a permanent member, and 115 countries have expressed support for that proposal. It is time, for the love of mercy, that China, Russia, and the United States join them, Mr. al-Hussein said.